The early 1900s was the heyday of the British postcard, especially so after the post office relaxed its monopolistic restrictions and, for a halfpenny postage stamp, wish you were here messages written on cards bearing attractive scenes became an integral part of the British seaside holiday. Robin Hood's Bay on England's North Yorkshire coast was once home to a thriving industry of inshore fishing, but this was fast disappearing by the early 20th century, when crowds of tourists and other visitors descended upon this rather picturesque village, and it was here that attractive picture postcards could be found for sale at many of the shops. Some of them would be photographic views, whilst others were of scenes that had been painted and reproduced on cards. The artist of these particular paintings was James Ulric Walmsley, and whilst his talents as an artist may seem to have been encapsulated purely for the holiday mementos market, we shall see that his paintings display a quality of insight and technique that stretch far beyond the picture postcards that helped to make him so famous in his own village. This little film is about him. This small house on King Street was Ulric's home and shop for many years, from 1894, when he brought his young family to live in the village he described as the most beautiful place he had ever seen. He would spend the rest of his life here. It was certainly very different from their previous home in Shipley, near Bradford, to where he and his wife Jeanie had moved from Liverpool in 1889. In common with many artists of the period, he must have believed that the North Yorkshire coast, and in particular Robin Hood's Bay, would be better suited to his artistic aspirations. The blue plaque on the Shipley house marks the birthplace of Ulric's son Leo, the well-known writer, who also helped raise the profile of Robin Hood's Bay. And this is the window where Ulric displayed his paintings. So the ground floor was his shop, and the family lived upstairs. Those times, around the turn of the 20th century, have been described in two of Leo's books, though he leaves out any mention of his two brothers and sister. Again, the blue plaque over this door is for Leo. Here's a surviving receipt from the shop, dated March 1897. From this we can tell that, apart from selling paintings, Mr. and Mrs. Walmsley were also supplying art materials. In addition, Ulric offered tuition and took on signwriting jobs and photography. For many years he could be seen at his easel, in the streets, on the beach, or in the surrounding countryside. This photo is said to be of him. Watercolours enabled Ulric to satisfy the demand for mementos and souvenirs for the frequent summer visitors. This remarkable ability to capture such lasting first impressions is what presumably drew the attention, around 1904, of J. W. Ruddock, a Lincoln-based printer who commissioned Ulric to paint a set of local scenes for their artist series of postcards. In total, 144 postcards comprise the entire collection, the images taken from watercolours by many artists across the country, and on the rear of each card was printed. The series included 60 Yorkshire views, of which ultimately 36 were provided by Ulric. In 1910, an article in the Whitby Gazette said that Ulric Walmsley is a clever master of the brush, and his commission work has at all times given satisfaction, which maybe confirms why he was one of only 30 artists across the country being used. In that same year, Ulric painted this postcard, from this photograph, in which it is believed that Ulric himself can just be seen at the far end. In fact, as his wife Jeanie had worked for a photographer before they were married, there is a possibility that this scene was composed by her. And if we look again at the postcard, we can see a lady sitting at the bow of this boat. She wasn't in the photo, maybe because she was the one behind the camera. Anyhow, it would seem that Ulric was determined to place his wife in the painting. Aside from the 36 postcards published by J. W. Ruddock, an unknown number were done for Henry Jenkinson of Leeds. So far, only 2 of those have been found. so there may be more of them out there, waiting to be discovered. The postcards of Ulric's Robin Hood's Bay, the early ones costing a penny a time, were so popular that they were selling for over 40 years after issue and helped to keep his wife and 4 children. With an identifiable style that, no doubt, has some bearing on the longevity of their appeal, these images have not only become a trademark of Ulric's work, but also of the area. At some point in the 1890s, he had studied under the painter Stanhope Forbes, who was a leading member of the Newlyn Art Colony in Cornwall, and went on to found the Newlyn Art School in 1899. Now, Forbes was a proponent of painting en plein air, outdoors, and undoubtedly influenced Ulric. As well as this enthusiasm for painting out in the open, Ulric took away from Newlyn the distinctive portrait style of his most celebrated life studies, which I'll come back to a bit later, and broadened the range of his landscape work to include the town scenes that featured so prominently in his postcards. For good measure, in 1899, Ulric also stole Stanhope Forbes' signature style. However, there was more to Ulric's art than he took away from Newlyn, and he went on to develop his own style, as these early paintings show. Being seen out and about at his easel was one certain way to encourage visitors to watch him at work and speak with him, and is one method by which he would make sales or even commissions for certain scenes and portraits. Here, for example, is a watercolour painting of the Laurel Inn as seen on the 1904 postcard. Compare this with the same scene painted the previous year. The same painting, with the colours enhanced to match the unfaded area hidden for all those years behind the mount. By 1914 he had moved his home and studio to Grosvenor Villa, a building that is now the left-hand side of the Grosvenor Hotel. Many of the postcards were sold from Ulric's studio there, being an ideal location just opposite the railway station and the first shop to be seen by the hordes of visitors as they arrived at the village. While the demands of the tourists for Ulric's trademark views, whether being purchased as penny-a-time postcards or half-guinea watercolours, provided him with a reasonably steady income, Ulric was determined to fully develop his skills as an artist, and as we'll see, his creativity was much broader than required for the tourist trade. He regularly exhibited works, especially in oils, across the north of England, and sometimes in London. These are some of the works that we think were painted with a view to being exhibited. And what of Ulric the person? Here are some words by the late Nona Stead of the Walmsley Society.
He had a delightful sense of humour, impish at times, and quite at variance with the rather staid religious side of his personality. He was a considerate husband and a caring father, though he liked to uphold his position as head of the family. Ulric and Jeanie had their own areas of authority, and it seemed to work quite well, creating a comfortable family atmosphere. There are 1 or 2 amusing episodes when Leo and Ulric conspired to frustrate Jeanie's strict orders, but generally he fully supported her decisions regarding the upbringing of the children. Ulric had great confidence in his ability as an artist, and was disappointed when he did not achieve early fame, which he felt he deserved.
All the time he was striving for perfection working in oils, the medium he preferred. These account for around a quarter of his known works, even though his watercolours intended for the tourist market are valuable by today's standards. Many of them will not have survived, having faded over the years or been consigned to a damp attic. Oil paintings, on the other hand, are more durable, and we can identify quite a few of those listed in exhibitions. Here is a delightful pair of very early oil paintings showing scenes at Robin Hood's Bay from 1893. We should note that he was living in Shipley at that time and didn't move to the coast until the following year. So was he there on an R&D mission, taking in the exquisite coastal beauty and attractive village scenes before making the decision to bring his family to live there? One of the subjects he preferred, commissions permitting, was portraiture. These works could be in any one of several styles, depending on the tastes, often rather dour, of his clients and whether he was painting for his own pleasure. This one is Ulric's self-portrait, perhaps painted when he was approaching 60, and is typical of his relaxed, modern style. And this fine study of a fisherman, which is dated 1909, harks back to the style of the Newlyn art colony. Here we see an engaging portrait of his wife, probably produced during his years in Liverpool. It may be a photographic enlargement that has been hand-coloured in oils, although Ulric's great-granddaughter, Frances, believes he was very good at copying a likeness. And here is another portrait, hidden from the public gaze. It is of Reverend Jermain Cooper, a vicar of Robin Hood's Bay for almost 6 decades. Painted in 1919, this life-size painting lay damaged with a canvas tear for many years and was finally restored by Fylingdales Museum Trust. Here it is being presented to its new home at Fylingdales Village Hall during a Walmsley Society meeting in 2007. Reverend Cooper and his successors were regular patrons of Ulric's work. This fine watercolour depicts the vicarage. Ulric clearly enjoyed painting flowery gardens. This is the view from the vicarage garden. It just so happens that James Ulric Walmsley wasn't the only artist living in Robin Hood's Bay. This is Tommy Baxter Street, where the well-known Scottish artist Ethel Walker had converted some cottages, creating a studio 24 feet long with a huge glass window across the breadth of the seaward side. This, incidentally, was where Ulric's son Leo met one of Ethel Walker's models. She would become his second wife. Anyhow, in 1925, Ulric and Ethel Walker became 2 of the 8 founder members of the Fylingdales group of artists. From around 1924, Ulric had moved his pictures business to this 12 by 9 feet hut that was positioned close to the top of Bay Bank. Its location was just above one of his most painted scenes, Main Street. I think I prefer the term cabin, as simply referring it to a hut doesn't seem to do it justice. As with the Grosvenor studio opposite the station, it would surely be an excellent position to attract visitors, especially those on their last climb to the top before leaving for home. The land rent came to £2 per annum, and he provided the cabin himself. From the 1930s he had moved to a house on Thorpe Lane, which he also called the studio. This was where he was living and working in 1939, when recently discovered documents show that he agreed to a further tenancy for the Baybank cabin. So you may ask, how many studios can one artist need? Well, out of season he may not have used the cabin much, and in season he needed a shop, and Thorpe Lane was maybe too far off the beaten track. This photo, taken late summer 1953, is probably one of the last ones taken of Ulric. He's with his son Sidney, granddaughter Sheila and her children. In 1954, Ulric was living with his daughter, the first Sheila, in the studio on Thorpe Lane. One day a small yellow card was delivered. It was a complimentary pass that would allow him to attend the Royal Academy's summer exhibition, a dream he had been nurturing and striving towards for over 50 years, having submitted dozens of paintings, he said, in that time, each one of them rejected. Until now. Exhibit number 68, it was displayed in Gallery 1, to the left of the vestibule. This painting, composed over 50 years before, and labelled Granny, was a study of old age, using as the model a Newlyn fishwife who had also posed for Stanhope Forbes and other famous members of the Newlyn art colony. So finally, at the age of 93, James Ulric Walmsley achieved his ambition of a place at the Royal Academy of Arts. But he would not get to use his exhibitor's pass. He died soon afterwards, whilst his painting was on display in London, admired by thousands, unseen by its creator. Today, Ulric's postcards are collectible items, and his paintings tend to arouse much interest at auctions. All 38 postcard images have been published in this Walmsley Society book, Robin Hood's Bay to Staithes, available from bookshops and online. His paintings have been used for covers of Leo's books. And Ulric art exhibitions are occasionally held at the Walmsley Society's annual meetings in Robin Hood's Bay.